Stepping up to the couch, it's Brian, who led the league last season in cracked screens. But with his new athletic case, it looks like that won't be the case. Touchdown, Brian!
This video hurts to make, like, a lot. If you don't know me, I am a Chicago Bulls fan, and not getting a top 2 pick really pissed me off. But I can talk about another franchise's lottery luck without getting petty, right? Yeah, I can totally not fucking do that. Hey, did you guys know that Memphis traded 2 second-round picks that both are going to go early in the second round, as well as Wayne Selden for Justin Holiday? Wayne Selden then had a better season than Holiday, so the Bulls got a better player in what are essentially 2 late first-round picks. That totally makes up for the Bulls getting the 7th pick and not 2nd, right? No, it doesn't. So now I'm gonna be really petty. Back in 2003, you know how the Detroit Pistons got the 2nd pick in the draft? Well, that pick actually belonged to the Memphis Grizzlies originally, and it had a top 1 protection on it. So had the Grizzlies gotten slightly lucky, they would have gotten the 1st overall pick, and let's see, who's available at number 1 in 2003? Oh yeah, LeBron fucking James, one of the greatest players to ever live. So, screw you, Memphis. But at the same time, I do want to talk about the Memphis Grizzlies, who have a very bright and underrated future, so maybe not screw the Memphis Grizzlies. So this is a really weird intro, but at least it's not as weird as my last one. So the Memphis Grizzlies lucked out in the draft lottery, and it pretty much means that they're going to be drafting Ja Morant, the 2nd most hyped prospect from this year's draft class. So I want to talk about Morant on the Grizzlies and the Memphis Grizzlies' future as a whole.
Rebound. Save. Absolutely incredibly with the acrobatic alley-oop.
So before we talk about Ja Morant and how he ties in with this roster, let's talk about, well, this roster. There are 2 key guys that I want to talk about, and 2 really not all that key guys that I also want to talk about. Starting with the 2 key guys, we have Dillon Brooks and Jaren Jackson Jr. Now, most people know the name Jaren Jackson Jr., but a name you might not recognize is Dillon Brooks, who is one of my favorite young players in the league, and in my opinion, one of the most underrated. Dillon Brooks is a 6'6" shooting guard / small forward who was drafted in the 2nd round of 2017, and he ended up being a hell of a steal. As a rookie, he started over 70 games at small forward, which is a position that I believe he shouldn't be playing. He's really more of a 2 guard, but he can play the 3. Dillon is a really solid 3-point shooter, a lot better than his percentages would indicate, because Mike Conley only played 12 games. Dillon didn't have a reliable point guard to set him up. Andrew Harrison and Mario Chalmers were the starting point guards for the Memphis Grizzlies for most of the season. I think that says enough. Dillon is also a pretty good defender, and he has some shot creating ability. Not at an elite level, and I never expect him to get to an elite level, but it's something that he can do if he has to. If you want to get an idea of the type of player that he is, my comparison would be Portland Trail Blazers Wesley Matthews. At his peak, Wes Matthews was a mid-teen scorer and a very good defensive player who was a great 3-point shooter and could create his shot from time to time. And a player like that, I think, can be the 4th best player on a championship team, the one guy who isn't quite a star player, but really contributes to winning. Sorry if that went on for too long, but I have a man crush on Dillon Brooks, so I had a lot to say about the guy. So the next guy we have to talk about is Jaren Jackson Jr., who of course was selected 4th overall in last year's draft. Jaren is a fantastic defender. He's pretty much an A+ defender already, with potential to be an A+++ defender, like top 3 defender in the league good. He's a really good shot blocker. He averages 2 blocks a game per 36, and he also has the speed and length to bother guards on the perimeter. And offensively, he's a very good shooter for a center / power forward, and just pretty solid in general. He's a pretty solid ball handler, finisher at the rim, and an okay post player. Like, he can do it versus a switch, just not good enough that it will be a go-to move for him, especially matched up against players his size. But of course, he's only 19 years old and he can improve on many of these aspects of his game and maybe become a good post player down the line. Being only 19 years old seems to be a big deal in the NBA. Look at Jason Tatum. That man's going to be 19 until he's 40. I mean, I'm also 19 years old, but nobody hypes me up like Jason Tatum, but that's fine, I guess. And the next two kind of important guys are the players that the Grizzlies got back in the Marc Gasol trade, Jonas Valanciunas and DeLon Wright. Jonas, I have a lot more confidence in him being in the Grizzlies' long-term plans than DeLon Wright, because Jonas was amazing in his 19 games with the Memphis Grizzlies. He averaged 20 and 11, shooting 55% from the field, and I think he can be a really good sixth man. I don't like the idea of him being a long-term starter, because Jaren Jackson Jr. is really more effective at the 5 spot, and having Jackson at 5 with some other stretch 4 next to him would create some great spacing. Valanciunas in the lineup would limit the potential of this team, at least shooting-wise. But he could help Jackson with one of the few flaws in his game, which is rebounding. He only averaged 6 rebounds a game in the time that he played this year, which was not a lot. Hopefully he can improve that aspect of his game. And as for DeLon Wright, he's a decent shooter and ball handler and a really good defender. He is 26, same for Valanciunas, so they're pretty much at their peaks, but not so old that they can't fit the timeline for the younger guys. So now let's talk about Ja Morant, who the Grizzlies have said they have every intention of taking, barring a crazy trade package, so they'll be taking him. Morant, I think, ties into the skill sets of Jackson and Brooks perfectly. Neither of those guys have real ISO ability, so they need a guy that can set them up on offense. Brooks needs a guy that can find him open on the perimeter, and Jackson needs a guy that can set him up in the pick and roll as well as on the perimeter. Luckily, Ja Morant is a very skilled slasher and passer. While he may have some issues with his jump shot, there is no doubt that he knows how to get to the basket and create for his teammates. The Jaren Jackson Jr. times Ja Morant pick and roll is going to be a very deadly combination for a decade plus, and Dillon Brooks will be able to play off of that perfectly, coming off of screens, and if some help comes off of him, he can get an open jumper off of that. Especially if Morant further develops his pull-up game, that's one of the weaker aspects of his game. If he becomes a threat pulling up out of the pick and roll, I don't really know how you defend that two-man game. Now, the Memphis Grizzlies unfortunately have one giant elephant in the room, and that elephant is named Mike Conley. There are two very clear options with Mike. Either trade him for some more young players, or keep him around to mentor Morant and the other young guys. Now, trading Conley would unfortunately be pretty damn complicated. He has one of the biggest contracts in the league. He's making $32 million next year and $34 million in 2021, and he will be making that $34 million when he is 33 years old. But he also just had the best year of his career, and he could potentially be worth it to a decent handful of teams. I could see the Pistons offering the number 15 pick Luke Kennard and then Reggie Jackson and John Lure for salary reasons. The Pistons have been desperate for a really good point guard for a long time, and Mike Conley could definitely be that. A starting lineup of Morant, Kennard, Brooks, a power forward taken with the 15th pick, and Jaren Jackson Jr. I would say that's a pretty damn good start, but maybe the Pistons don't want to take that trade. I couldn't really think of anything else off of the top of my head. Maybe the Lakers get desperate. I don't know. And the second option is pretty self-explanatory. For a while, you could start Morant and Conley, and the leadership of Conley would certainly help Morant. But regardless of whatever decision that the Memphis Grizzlies make with Mike Conley, they should be pretty well set up for the future with a core of Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. Here's hoping that Ja Morant just doesn't end up like the last number 2 overall pick by the Memphis Grizzlies, or the last number 2 pick that belonged to the Memphis Grizzlies originally, or really most draft picks made by the Memphis Grizzlies and most number 2 overall picks. He'll be fine. So that's the end of that discussion, but a bunch of new people are here. I gained 1,000 subscribers in 3 days, which is the fastest my channel has ever grown before, and it was very overwhelming, and I very much appreciate that. But since there are some new people here, you might not know about the recent documentary that I put out. It's a documentary on the greatest players of all time. It was about about the GOAT debate in general. I spent over a year making it. It's over 2.5 hours long, and it's 2.5 hours of, in my opinion, obviously I'm biased, some very good content. So if you like my stuff, you would definitely like that. It's called the Goatmentary. You just scroll down my channel page a little bit and you can see part 1. I also had a thing, I don't know what the hell they're called, and it's actually over here. Thing that's a little card, I think they're called. Yeah, it's called cards, I think. Promoting the Goatmentary full, which I have a full version and 4 parts, whichever one you want to look at. I would really appreciate it. If you are new here, please be sure to like and subscribe, and cue the outro music.